tenants in BC have yet again gained more power, and this is going to cause major issues for landlords across the province. As of July 18th, 2024, Bill 14 has been implemented by the BC government in order to enforce stricter rules as well as more transparency in the Tenancy Act. If you haven't already heard about this or looked into what exactly it entails, and you're already a landlord or thinking about becoming a landlord, you really need to pay attention, because these new changes, well, they change everything. In this video, I'm going to be going over the 2 new rule changes that have recently been implemented, as well as 2 more that are going to be implemented in the near future. And that's coming at you in just a minute. What's going on, guys? Alex Dunbar here, your favorite local realtor from the Surrey and Langley areas, back again with another video. If this is your first time on my channel, I make weekly videos pertaining to the BC and Canadian real estate market, as well as showcase community tours across the Lower Mainland. So if that's something you're interested in seeing more of, I suggest you consider subscribing to our channel. But diving right into today's video, there have been 2 major changes recently implemented which change the way that evictions occur. And those are the process for actually providing notice to a tenant, as well as the amount of time that you have to give tenants. So as of July 18, 2024, if you were a landlord who is going to be giving notice to your tenants, there is now a landlord use web portal which you have to do it through. The reason behind it was that the RTB wants to increase transparency as well as have the ability to audit for compliance. So essentially, they're just trying to get rid of unfaithful evictions. Now, at surface level, this sounds great and all, but it comes with a couple of concerns. And so essentially what some of the largest concerns are the amount of information that you actually have to provide the tenant. And specifically when it's somebody who is purchasing the property for their own use. So not only are you having to provide the names of the individuals who are taking over the property for their own use, whether that be family or somebody that is purchasing it, but now they're also having to provide birthdates, which seems a little bit obscene to me. On top of that, it was originally stated they would have to provide the CPS, contract of purchase and sale, so essentially the agreement for the purchase of the home, which has personal information. And then on top of that, the subject removal form to show that the purchase is actually technically going through, and then the request from the buyer to provide notice to the tenant, which honestly isn't a big deal, as well as the 4-month notice itself. So the biggest issue here was essentially just in terms of actually breaching confidentiality with the individuals and the contract of purchase and sale, and having to provide that to the tenants. In reality, there's really no reason why they need that information. That's not information that we can share with other individuals or anybody outside of our client relationship itself, unless it's somebody else that is party to the transaction, such as a mortgage broker or a lawyer, but that would be the clients providing that information to them. And so essentially, it just seems like a bit of an overreach in terms of privacy. However, it does sound like they no longer require that information to be provided to the actual tenant itself. It is now just to be provided to the RTB. And in regards to providing that information to the RTB, I completely understand and am on board with ensuring that landlords are compliant and not breaking the rules. However, do we really want the government to just continue to have more and more and more information on us? It's not that they don't already have this information, but again, it just seems like a bit of an overreach. And as a Canadian, I think we want some degree of freedom, not having the government looking over our shoulder at every single move. Once again, we need to ensure that people are being compliant with these things, but I think there's probably just a better way. But I digress, because that's not the larger topic of this conversation, and that will be moving on to point number 2, which is having to provide tenants with 4 months notice, which was previously only 2. So when we talk about the 2-month changed to 4-month notice, what you have to understand is that typically it's going to be closer to 2.5 or 4.5 weeks, dependent on when the notice is given, because it actually has to be a full 2 months or 4 months now's notice, and not just from the date that the notice is given. What I mean by this is, let's say you give notice on August the 3rd. All of August doesn't actually count, and the first full month would be starting in September. So September, October, November, December, January 1st is the earliest you'd be able to take possession of the property, whether you've purchased it or whether you're the landlord owner and are wanting to use it for your own personal use. Now, from a buyer's perspective, that is a long ways out. Most people aren't wanting to wait that long, and especially with all the other potential concerns that comes with. The biggest ones being the fact that you can't actually get a full mortgage approval outside of 90 to 120 days. So you can get a rate hold for that period of time as well as mortgage qualification, but they're not going to actually approve a mortgage that is outside of those dates. Now, if you have a ton of capital and room in order to purchase it, you're not really going to have any issues here. However, if the numbers are tight even whatsoever or something substantially changes during this period of time, you could get yourself into big trouble. Additionally, if it's a strata property, sometimes the lender will actually not approve the mortgage for other reasons. For instance, if there was some sort of pending or ongoing litigation that they didn't like, didn't want to take on the risk of, or a massive special levy in the future that, again, they didn't want to take the risk of, they could actually turn you down for your mortgage, even though all of the numbers from your income, your down payment, and everything else look good. So this poses a massive risk to anybody who isn't purchasing that unit in cash. Additionally, home insurance will not cover you if the tenant decides not to leave after those 4 months. And the worst part about this is in almost every case that I've heard of where you get squatters or a tenant that isn't willing to leave the property after they've been given notice and they're supposed to be out, the landlord generally doesn't get any compensation, or at least very little, and it definitely doesn't make up for the potential losses and damages that were done. And so when you're taking all these things into account, it's just making the act of purchasing an already tenanted property far more risky than it already is. And so that's turning potential buyers off. Now, I also mentioned that there's some more things in the pipeline that they're soon going to be implementing. However, they haven't just yet. And so the first of those is that they're planning to eliminate the conversion of a rental unit to a non-residential purpose. Now, the exact timing of this change, as well as the details, haven't been outlaid yet. However, we do know that it will be coming sometime in the near future. So it's just something to keep an eye out for and be aware of. Now, the second thing that is also in the pipeline is that they're going to be increasing a landlord's time in which they must occupy a property after the eviction. So currently it's at 6 months, and they're going to be increasing that to 12 months. So essentially what that means is if you're taking over that rental unit for your own personal use, or you are putting a family member in it, whatever that may be, you're now going to have it occupied for at least 12 months before you re-rent it. And so the purpose behind this is to ensure that landlords aren't just unfaithfully evicting tenants in order to raise rents or to put a more favorable tenant in, perhaps. So the one good thing about this, of course, is that they are trying to prevent unfaithful eviction. However, they're also continually taking away the rights of the homeowner. So while it's extremely important that tenants are protected and have their rights, how far are we going to go? Because the government just seems to continually strip away all the rights that homeowners have to their own properties, what they're able to do with it, and tenants, if they know what they're doing or if they're abusing the system, are able to basically get away with murder. And what I think is actually misunderstood a lot of the times is that the majority of these owners of these rental properties are what we call mom and pop investors, whether that's a basement suite, whether that's maybe a secondary condo that they've purchased in order to secure their financial future, and they actually make up a large portion of the rental market. And they're not necessarily getting rich off of having you rent out the units. A lot of the units right now, if you're to purchase with 20% down, are not cash flowing, are not covering the mortgage. They're actually subsidizing your rent. And with caps on rental increases annually, even though interest rates have gone up significantly, the cost of housing has gone up significantly, essentially inflation has caused everything to be more expensive. Renters in BC have essentially up until this point in time been protected from a lot of that. And if your mortgage costs have gone up by, let's say, $1,000 and property taxes have gone up by 10 to 15%, plus you add in all these new regulations, why would anyone choose to purchase a rental or rent out their current property? The numbers just don't make sense. A lot of people who are more established, maybe have owned their home for a number of years and have a basement suite, are choosing not to rent it out because the risk to reward ratio is just not making sense anymore. And unfortunately, what does that do? It decreases the housing supply, and typically basement suites are cheaper than condos. So we're not only taking away housing supply, we're taking away the cheaper housing supply. And while people believe that if all these investors start to sell off properties, that prices are going to come down and then everybody's just going to be able to get into the market, unfortunately, that's just not reality. But I digress because that wasn't the purpose of this video. So let's get back to the original topic, and I have a few suggestions. Suggestion number 1 is to pull back that new time frame for the minimum amount of notice to 3 months or 90 days. At least this will put us back into the required time period for buyers to be able to make sure that their mortgage is actually approved. Even if they do this just for properties that are being sold to a new purchaser and not for owners who are wanting to take back their space, I think this would be a good start, even though I feel like it would be reasonable to do it for both. Suggestion number 2 would be for lenders to provide some sort of new mechanism to accommodate the new regulation. So essentially, for a buyer who is trying to purchase a tenanted property, giving them the ability to purchase something that is outside of the typical time frame. What exactly this would look like, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm sure they can figure it out. And then suggestion number 3 would be to increase the ability or power of landlords and new purchasers to get tenants out who have violated the terms of their contract. Because there's people that are considered professional tenants that know how to work the system, know all the loopholes, and are able to get themselves into properties where they don't end up paying rent, potentially do damage, whatever that may be, and it's very difficult to get them out. And honestly, I just don't understand why this is even a thing. If there's going to be punishment on unfaithful landlords, why isn't there punishment to unfaithful tenants? The process shouldn't be as difficult as it currently is, and people shouldn't be worried about this if they're going to follow the rules. But unfortunately, the government rarely takes any sort of advice or guidance or consultation from the industries that they're actually impacting. And they make these decisions because they sound nice at surface level, but they don't necessarily understand how it's actually going to impact things. But at the end of the day, hopefully the government will realize sooner rather than later what the negative impacts some of the changes they've made are going to have, and they will at least make some revisions. But honestly, I'm not super hopeful. Anyways, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Are these new regulations going to help or hurt the majority of people? And what would you do differently? Let me know down in the comments. And if you are looking to buy, sell, or invest in my marketplace of Surrey, Langley, and the rest of the Fraser Valley, or you just want to have a chat about real estate, you can scroll down and click the first link in the description to book a call with me at a time that works best for you. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you check out another video on my channel before you get out of here, and we'll see you in the next video.